Test. again. All right, we're ready.
Okay. Andrew, my screen shows that we are recording and we are live.
Got it.
Good. Well, good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for zooming in with us for the Finance Committee meeting. Connie, I'd had a chance to speak with David just a little earlier. Stacy will not be on with us today. But we think we've got enough to go through and Andrew's got enough to update and then have discussion with you all that we can have a productive time without her.
Okay, that's good.
And since I know I'm not the chair of this committee, how would you council members like to proceed, or Andrew, do you have an agenda for us to follow?
We have an agenda. It was the first item on there was a financial update, but we'll skip that since we don't have Stacy. And the next item on the agenda was discussion of picking our revenue project back up.
Okay.
David, if you don't mind leading this and asking questions, I would greatly appreciate it.
No problem. No problem.
And Andrew mentioned that Stacy's not on here to give us a financial report. We are going to end the year even stronger than we thought we had. So I think all of that is a piece of emerging better news. But that's one thing that you can anticipate. We had mentioned getting 2 quarters of results in before we took a real hard look at re-predicting our revenues. And Stacy will have some of that information by the end of January. Some of it will be just a little bit later than that, but that picture is getting more clear as we get more information in.
Okay. Well, we're going to talk about revenue streams today.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, a couple of things that we had asked Andrew to look at. The presentation that we had last January was very effective in kind of setting the stage for the conversations. And there seemed to be pretty good buy-in into that report and just what its illustration of what our real circumstances are right now. And there wasn't a lot of pushback from anybody, so I think it became a fairly accepted piece of work. We wanted to make sure that we had updated it so that its conclusions were still valid, or the information was still valid, especially the comparative data where we compare salaries that are so fluid, since every department is responding at different times with personnel needs and in the personnel market. So that changes every month or two. So we wanted to freshen all that information. And I think one thing we wanted to go through today is let Andrew lead us through that presentation. And then as a part of that presentation, there's information that will give us the opportunity to talk about, well, what would that change? What would that generate? Different scenarios where you can begin to see a range of impact from each of the options and what all the options might be in the way that they can be blended in ways that I hope will become evident to us. And we've gone ahead and predicted what types of revenue those would raise. The other thing that's going to be really glaring to you, I think, where Andrew's extended our financial analysis to some of the known costs that we have. If he's going to again give us scenarios where if we try to address some headcount issues and reasonable growth in headcount, none of this can be done overnight and in one budget year. But Andrew's going to show us some multi-year phased in employment. And Andy, that's enough for me. Why don't you just start going through the slides, and they'll become real evident, and we can talk about each one of them as you go.
Yeah, I'll share my screen. I just want to say that, the intent is for me to eventually put a narrative to this, a script, much like we did when we showed this presentation to council, and perhaps and likely even record it again. But for now, I'm just going to kind of walk through it. So it'll be, as a result, it'll take a little bit longer because we're going to talk and answer questions and things like that. First, the first several slides are a bit of a recap, but they're also, as the mayor said, updating numbers. I thought what we needed to do was take sort of the most critical pieces of info from last year's presentation and sort of summarize it and boil it down the best we can. Oops. So the first slide is just an indication of the fact that when you adjust it for inflation, we're dealing with just a little bit more than half of the revenues per capita that we did. Not sure why my slide is auto running. I'll just keep it here and we'll go through slide by slide. Apologize for that. So the next slide acknowledges the fact that we all, just like we're down in our revenues per capita, we're down compared to our peers, our peer average. And these are still 2018 numbers. I haven't gone through every single, 16, 17 cities' new budgets to find their revenues, their audits. So I'm sticking with 2018 numbers, but at that time we were $278 per capita lower in revenues, and that's an equivalent of almost $10 million in revenue difference from those cities. It's about 2/3 of our peers. This is a new slide, but it's not necessarily new information. It shows the fact that over the last 20 years, we've actually, when you adjust for inflation, we actually spend less today on salary than we did 20 years ago. But we spend substantially more on non-salary personnel costs, things like retirement and benefits. So the point is that it's more expensive to employ the folks that we do employ, regardless of the salary changes. We're having to keep up double duty, keep up with the cost, inflation and CPI, and also to keep up with rising non-salary personnel costs. This is 1999 versus 2001 at a glance, and I think this slide shows it all. It shows the whole story. We have 28 fewer employees than we did, or I'm sorry, 22 fewer employees than we did 20 years ago. We have roughly the same number of police officers. We actually have one less. And I believe we're not only short on authorized strength, but we're down both in police and fire. We have 16 or 13 more firefighters, but that has not kept pace with the amount of city growth. We've doubled the number of residents, and we've actually doubled the square miles. And we have not, the square mileage is in there to illustrate the point that the last time we built a fire station was in 1994. That was 5 years prior to that 9.9 square miles. We've doubled the size of the city. We've doubled the square mileage of the city since the last time we built the fire station. And that's a lot. There's a lot of territory to keep up with. And when you adjust our budget for inflation, we're only operating about $4 million more a year in revenues than we were 20 years ago.
Andrew, can I ask you a quick question?
Sure, and jump in anytime.
Do you have, is there a PDF that you could send to Connie and myself? I can see this pretty well on my little phone screen, but if I had a PDF, I could kind of pull it up on my bigger monitor as well. And if not today,
Can you open it in PowerPoint?
Maybe. If not, I can get the IT department to do it. It might not be immediately, but I probably can get it done.
I can actually in the background here have this. I can PDF it right now while we're talking. So
Okay.
I will get you that right
To
now.
our email?
Yes. It may take just a minute for it to build.
Okay.
This would be hopeless on a phone screen.
Yeah.
I can see it really well because I'm on my iPad. But if you PDF it, I can print it off and study it on some downtime.
On its way.
Thanks, buddy.
All right. All right. I want to move on then.
Yeah.
This is pretty amazing slide.
Yeah.
It is.
I mean, for all intents and purposes, the size of our city has doubled, and the resources with which we run it have not kept pace. Some of them have gone down, and it shows.
Yes, it does.
So CERS retirement expenses account for 10% of the general fund budget. That's a pretty substantial chunk, and the graphs on the right illustrate what we already know, which is those rates are going to increase substantially over the course of the next 4 years, and then stay pegged there for a few years before they start to slowly decrease. And as we do things like add headcount and give salary increases, those contribution rate increases have to be factored in.
Right.
And we'll show you that later.
This makes us have to run faster, run harder to overcome that. And actually this phase in from 2018 to 2024 is what we pleaded for. So they wouldn't immediately hit us with super high rates. But we're certain that those will increase each year by an already set schedule amount. And then once we hit 2024, they should stay, the rates themselves should stay stationary.
Okay.
I'm going to do one thing here. Pull this up. See if I can get it to stop running. All right. We've lost David. Should I wait for him?
Yes. He'll get back on. He's probably trying to get on his big computer.
Gotcha.
Let me text him, ask him where he's at.
No, he might be in the men's room.
He might be. Well, I'll go ahead and move forward then.
Okay.
There he is.
Yes.
He's back.
Sorry, guys. I am at work and just kind of multitasking a little bit.
I understand. All right, let's see if we can go through this. So what I did here was I took the general fund expenditures over the last 3 years, to 3-year average. And I wanted to show where does our money go? And 3-year average is about $24.6 million. And when you take away salaries, benefits, taxes, unemployment insurance, all those things that we spend to employ folks, you just took away more than half of our budget.
The cool thing about this graph, this pie chart, as it disappears, the balance changes up in your upper right-hand corner.
Right.
And you can kind of track the remainder as we pull out these key segments of our spending.
Right. So as the mayor said, there's about, after that, there's about $11.5 million left to spend. We spend another $4.5 million on interlocals. And that's just, there's no point in breaking that down because we don't have a whole lot of control over where that goes. It's money that we pay to our shared interlocals that the counties run. That leaves a balance of about $7 million to work with. And once you figure in what we spend in, electricity and internet and gas and fuel, and we spend on insurance and the vehicles that we lease, professional services is a whole host of categories, but these are all really important projects that we undertake. Maintenance on our vehicles and on our buildings, and then debt service and interest. You take that away, and you're getting down to you've got about $2 million left to spare. We give $400,000 a year to all of our community partners, the Senior Citizen Center and all of the nonprofits that we support. We gotta fund our cemetery. That's another interlocal, but it's ours. So, plus we've spent an average of $368,000 over the last 3 years on stormwater. What's left is things like our computers, our equipment, the training that we do, office supplies, uniforms, travel, advertising, abatement costs. None of these individual things is a very large percentage, but I wouldn't argue that any of these things are things that you can just turn off. The balance, every other expenditure that we have, postage and little tiny projects that we do, you're looking at $150,000 out of a $24 million budget. I think the point that we're really trying to illustrate here is that we're just trying to head off the argument that there's excess to be found, that there's things to be cut, that there's money that we're spending that we don't need to spend.
Right.
It's hard to demonstrate that in any other way than to say, here's where our money goes. I suppose you could get into fine grain on any of those things, but most of those categories, before you get to $2 million, are things that we really don't have any choice but to do.
I'm sorry, David, it just seemed to me to be the first time I saw it, to be a pretty powerful graphic way to represent that our spending is not out of balance in any one particular area other than where our priorities are.
Yeah.
Andrew, this is a new chart, right? That we didn't have a year ago.
Correct.
Yeah.
So we're spending about 24 million, and I apologize if I missed this, but have you done? Did we look at the revenue and what the revenue is, and what that comparison would be to the 24 million?
Not yet.
Okay.
No, I could get you those numbers, but in those 3 years, we managed to add to the fund balance every single year. I think other than the year that we did that giant capital project with the business park and the
Peace.
and the radio project where we spent all that out of
Yeah, right.
fund balance. So I guess my point is that revenues, you're going to see that revenues are at and slightly above those figures every year.
Okay. But we've got, there's a lot of things ahead of us, like you were saying with the pension issue that we're going to be dealing with. That's going to be an extra, I think, 1.8 million per year.
Well, I have that analysis in here a little bit later.
Yeah. Okay. I don't want to get ahead of you.
So, next I essentially did the same analysis in the fire department, and I won't walk through all of the steps, but once you get rid of salaries, benefits, retirement, taxes, and unemployment, you're left with about, it looks like 1/6 of the pie. Fuel and maintenance and utilities and insurance, and equipment and training. What's left is of their world is about $100,000. So you're not going to hire 15 new. You're not going to give raises and hire 15 new firefighters out of $100,000, and we'll show you that later.
Okay.
The point is to again show there's not a lot of fluff. So we're starting with the fire department. I should have mentioned that. All these next slides are going to be about the fire department. The two graphs on the bottom you've seen. We're 20 firefighters short of our peer average on firefighters. And I had Chief Colson try to determine what a national standard is. The FBI makes it abundantly clear what the standard is. The NFPA just gives you an average. Here's what most of our members are at. We're 7 firefighters short of that number. So we're down. And about whatever standard you judge, we are down in our number of firefighters. We talked about being short of our peers in firefighter salaries. So this is the salary of a first-year firefighter out of the academy with the incentive. We're about $4,600 short of our peers' average. That's after we gave the $5,000 increase. We had talked about a roughly $8,600 shortage in police and an $11,000 shortage in fire, and this is consistent with that. If anything, our new numbers show that gap has shrunk a little bit, but our fire department was further away from the average than the police department was. And you can see there's a lot of concentration in those higher numbers in Northern Kentucky, but you've also got Richmond in there and Lexington, which are our neighbors that pay their firefighters substantially more as a first year. And Ashland is way out there, but that's their number.
Andrew, can I ask you a quick question? And it's one that I think has already been asked. But are all of those, are they all considered hazardous duty communities?
These are all hazardous duty full-time firefighter positions.
Okay. This obviously doesn't take into consideration benefits. So the benefit package could manipulate this a little bit. It might not be the best word, but
they have that information too. It's just extremely difficult to try to compare that apples to apples in a slide. But yes, you are correct. There could be a difference in benefits.
So I'm just, one of the things that I think Connie and I had talked to Stacy about, and somebody else had requested it, but could we pull out maybe 4 or 5 of these cities and see what how their benefits impacted us compared to them? And if we don't ask that question right here, right now, somebody else is going to ask it. So I think we ought to be prepared.
Yeah, it seems like Frankfurt would be a good one since they're right on our border.
Ashland too.
And they're a little higher. Ashland ain't that, I mean, Northern Kentucky is a little bit of a different place, but
Yeah.
in Ashland and Frankfurt and
Probably
Richmond, Frankfurt,
Richmond.
Hopkinsville, I think is another good example.
Yeah.
All the others are either substantially bigger, substantially smaller, or kind of on their own.
When, just for your all's recollection, when we presented all this analysis and we included that one scenario and what it would cost, what our goal was to have both police and fire beginning salary after the Cooper's here. We expected those to get to the $50,000 a year level, including incentive. That was our goal then, and all the raises that we proposed were to achieve that for first-year firefighters.
Mm-hmm.
Now that just shows you we're a little bit off the average, and there's quite a stretch to get where we tried to in that first go around.
Yeah, look like Richmond, maybe Newport.
Yeah.
Is Newport close to us as far as people count?
They're a little smaller than us.
Okay. Well, that's good.
Our closest peer in terms of size is Richmond.
Well, you got Richmond and Newport are on the interstate just like we are.
Right.
So I think that would be a good comparison. Don't you, David?
You know what? I'm good with whatever you all think. I just appreciate you doing this. Sure. And finding 4 or 5 to compare it to. Tammy was the one I'm sitting here thinking about who was. It was actually Tammy that was asking about this, if I'm not mistaken.
It's a fair question for sure.
Yeah. Andrew, I got your email in the PDF. This is great. I've got it pulled up on my screen now, and it's very easy to see. And
I'm glad that helps.
Yes. Thank you.
All right. So we tried to put together, when we talk about hiring another firefighter, it's more than just the salary that goes into that. It's what we pay in taxes, it's what we pay in benefits, what we pay in retirement, but it's also the gear that we got to buy, the training that we got to put them through. Chief sent me, he just sent me some updated numbers earlier, and I haven't had a chance to put it in there, but these are pretty close. I think there's a little bit more training costs, but with the fire department, you've got annual costs, and then you've got some upfront costs of of training. So it costs on average about $75,700 to hire annually to hire a new firefighter, and you've got about $8,700 of one-time costs for each of those firefighters. So when we talk later about what is our total budget, what are our total revenue needs, this is the figure we're going to use.
So what we were trying to establish there, guys, is we're not ever going to propose we do all that at one time. As I indicated early, we want to have a staged approach to this. But to be able to really understand what each of those stages will cost, we wanted to look at first the total cost of getting the 15, the multi-year plan, and that'll give us something to break into smaller numbers so we can project the cost. And this was, we thought, a little more, just slightly more sophisticated is the wrong word, but this is probably a better average cost. Council members are always saying, well, what's it cost us for a new firefighter or a new police officer? And we thought it was important to figure that out to base some of our other projections on. All right, Andrew, go ahead.
All right. So this chart illustrates the fact that as you move up the fire management ladder, the gap between us and our peers increases.
Okay.
I don't have it in there yet, but I need to show the math between each of those. But you can clearly see visually that the scale on all these is exactly the same. You can see that as you go up the ranks, you're getting paid less and less compared to your peers. So if we talk about equalizing all of that, talk about trying to approach our peers, at some point it probably is necessary for us to look at the cost of those increases as well. I mean,
Yeah.
not all of our needs are increases for brand new hires. We've got
Right.
quite a few captains and battalion chiefs, and we got a chief, and I don't have math on those things at this point. I'm just trying to illustrate the fact that those discrepancies are there.
Yeah, and this at this stage doesn't come as a proposal, it's just information.
Right.
So now we're going to move on to the police department. Same analysis as we did earlier. I'll move through it quick. Get rid of retirement, benefits, salaries. You're again left with about a fifth of the pie, sixth of the pie. Get rid of motor vehicles and maintenance and insurance and utilities, all the things that it's hard to eliminate. You can't really eliminate, and your budget starts to dwindle. And basically the police department has only about 89,000 of miscellaneous expenditures, I'll call them. These things are still important, and you're still talking things like paper and postage, and I can't come up with all the things, but I can make a list. But we're talking a relatively small number of things. There's not, even if you were to eliminate all of that stuff, which you can't do, you still haven't paid for a single police officer. Same analysis as with the fire department. The bottom, you've actually seen this whole sheet, this whole chart. We're 17 officers short of our peer average of police officers per 1,000 residents, which is the national standard recognized. And the FBI standard for police officers per 1,000 residents is 2.4. So that's a statistic the FBI says is a national standard, if you will. I believe they consider more than an average, unlike the fire department. It's what the FBI says is a goal. And we're 23 officers short of that. Same analysis as first year. That should actually say certified police officer recruit with incentive. I apologize. But there between us and our peers average is a $6,400 difference. So actually we decreased the gap in the fire department and increased the gap in the police department. These are new numbers and these are different cities. They did a new survey and different cities responded. Most of the ones that were in the previous survey are still there, but there's actually additional ones as well. You'll see again a lot of the top there is Northern Kentucky cities or slightly larger cities, Paducah, Bowling Green. But Richmond is right around the average.
Yep.
Ashland is above the average again. Frankfurt is just slightly higher, but even still they're about $3,000 higher than us. So we're lagging our easily recognized peers in the area.
Yeah. Andrew, can we do the same thing with the police that we did with the fire department?
Absolutely.
Parallel, I guess, the same communities.
Same cities. Yep.
Yeah.
Good catch.
Same story with management, police management. The gap is higher in it, and it honestly is higher in all levels of police management. But the gap is larger than their first year officer. So if we were to try to equalize our management with other peers, we'd have to increase their salaries a lot more. It's that's the point of this slide.
Yeah. And Andrew, I think, I don't think I'll ever recommend that we get all the way to peer average, but being aware that there exists this big of a gap, we should be closer than we are.
Sure. It's a disincentive for upper management to stay when they can go to a lateral position in another city and make more. Same analysis for police officers. When you look at all the annual costs of bringing on a new police officer, it costs about $87,000 a year for each officer. So that's the end of our sort of department by department analysis that I have, except I've been chatting with Megan Miller and Robert Bruin in the past couple of days, and we know we're short on public works employees as well. Robert needs about 4 more full-time public works employees, but the problem he's having right now is he can't compete with the private sector, particularly on truck drivers, on certified CDL Class B drivers, people who would drive a garbage truck, people who would drive a panel truck or whatever, something more than is required by standard driver's license. He did some inquiries with some well-known companies around the area that hire Class B drivers, other waste haulers, folks that do things like drive rock trucks and cement trucks and things of that nature. And it's about $18 an hour, and right now we're at $14.33 an hour. And folks who are not drivers, who are just maintenance workers, which we hire, I believe, at $11 an hour, are averaging about 15. That's their recommendation, is that we increase our wages for maintenance workers and drivers to $15 and $18 respectively. I don't have costs for that yet. and they don't have costs other than I do have costs for what it would be to hire 4 new public works employees, just maintenance workers. But I know Robert is short and has been short, so we focused on first responders and public safety, but Robert really needs help. And I think the issue is no matter how many people we authorize him to hire, at this point, he can't hire them. He's been trying to hire people for months and months, and he can't get them. And he keeps losing the ones that we've got. Every time we get one, we lose one.
We've made a couple of efforts to address CDLs in the recent past, and it is tough to keep up with private industry, where we let folks come on board with a CDL permit and promise to help them get their actual CDL license, working for us and driving our vehicles. And basically, we're just training them for the private sector.
That's right.
I mean, I know we complain about doing that a lot with fire and policemen too, but it really happens here with CDL licenses. So I think it's a real concern.
So what's on the screen is what we know of our immediate or short-term capital project needs. And we know that we've got to widen Old Oxford. And we know that we need to build Lexus Way to provide that outlet. They're getting ready to open the floodgates on new houses out there. We're saying that, but now I'm hearing that from Planning Commission. Those houses are coming.
But Andrew, that we're going to be held up for that for a little bit because of the sewer problem, right?
No, these are all pre-approved.
Okay.
These are not going to get held up. As far as I understand, these were already approved for sewer.
Well, I know in White Oak Village, Mike G had some of them pre-approved too, and he finished out like 2 fourplexes, and he was pre-approved for them, but it had to go back through the board again, and he almost didn't get them, and he already had them sold.
They have a shelf life.
Yeah.
New board policy. So
Yeah.
I'm not 100% certain on that. All I know is that if the fact that they're now moving to the Planning Commission stage says to me they don't get there without that approval. But I mean, the fact also remains that it's a problem today. It's a terrible road that's accident prone, that's falling apart, that we can't really
I
repave.
agree.
Yeah, we can't even really repave it because it just washes away.
Well,
Can't
I've been
improve the
getting it
shoulders.
Yeah,
too
I've been getting
narrow.
through traffic committee too.
Yeah. I'm sure you all hear about it a lot in the traffic committee.
Getting ready to hear it on Tuesday. So we already got someone on there. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
And there's a variety of reasons why we need to do Lexus Way. And that $12 million between those two is what we submitted as our budget to the build grant 3 years in a row. So it's backed by an engineering estimate, and we just, no matter how many times we submit for that build grant, we're not going to get it. We had really high hopes that we had a great proposal, and there's just so much demand for that money.
Our difficulty right now is Judge Covington has already announced that they will be a part of an application that probably will come out of Bourbon County to finish the US 460 improvement between us and Paris.
Yeah.
And we can't compete with that project. If they elect to support that, we're banging our head against a wall.
I mean, Old Oxford and Lexus Way are our problems.
Yep.
Fire Station 4, it's coming. It's already here, to be honest. Just with our budget the way it is right now, we have not started that process. But Chief Colson has been, I mean, he's the third chief now to have pushed that and pushed that. It's time, at the very least, for us to look at a professional analysis of our coverage and to start thinking about where a Fire Station 4 might go and what it's going to cost to build it. And I mean, all I can do is give you broad estimates. It's going to be $8 to $10 million. It could be slightly less. It could be more.
Would that be our cost, or would the county go in with us?
That's the possibility if we make it also an EMS station, that we would share that cost.
Okay.
It will help. It will help a lot to cut that cost in half. And there has been
Talk of that.
a lot of talk about that.
Okay.
But that's another factor, right? That cuts both ways. If EMS is on track to build that a new EMS station, then that means that doubles the pressure because we're ready to build one and they're ready to build one, and we couldn't in good conscience hold them up if they're ready to do it now, and I understand that they are. So when we kind of join that effort together,
It will make no sense whatsoever not for those things not to be co-located, and we need to work, they need to work with us on that.
Yeah.
It would be a travesty if we didn't time those together.
Right.
And some of that stuff is important. We did not stay together on the issue of body cams
Yeah.
for law enforcement.
Mhm.
But this is one that I hope we can stay together on.
you all will remember that 3 years ago now, wow, has it really been 3 years? It has. We had an architect firm that specializes in old buildings like City Hall
Yes.
in and give us a proposal, and they divided that proposal into two pieces. And the first one was stabilization of the exterior of the building, which is just falling apart. I mean, the limestone is slaking off in large sheets, and all the stuff needs to be tuck pointed, and we've got leaks, and we've got buckling areas. That project, which is going to, even if we just did the exterior work, is going to involve shutting down City Hall, is a $2.2 million project, and I'm sure it's a long project. And then they gave us a proposal for making the inside of City Hall modernized and more capacity, more function and utility, just a better space and a larger space to accommodate future growth. And that was they estimated a $4.3 million project. That's a project, I'm speaking on my own behalf here. That's a project we would really like to see done. And it's hard to put it among the ranks of something like an old Oxford widening, but the fact is that City Hall is dog-eared. We've got to at least do the exterior stabilization project, and it makes a whole lot of sense that we would do both of those things at the same time, and we would borrow the money to pay for it. While the rates are good, and while they're going to shut the building down and close off Court Square and all those things that are attendant to fixing it. But this is just an estimate, so we can, when we go forward and we talk about what are our needs, we can't ignore these things, but we can boil them down to what's the cost of debt service to fund these things, and we'll get to that next. Do you all have any questions about? I threw the South Court Street rehab and expansion in there because at this point it's a capital project that we need to do and we can't afford to do it. And I'm sure there are some other projects like the South Broadway project that we talked about that need to go on here too. I'm just trying to help to give you a ballpark of where we are on our capital needs.
Yeah, and Connie, on the construction of Fire Station 4,
Mhm.
hopefully it will be a joint project. It'll be a little bigger because of that, but it'll be a shared cost. What will not be shared, though, that we'll really have to anticipate in the capital needs for that Fire Station 4 is a whole new set of apparatus.
Yeah.
So that's a whole lot of money for our trucks to put in another station. And then as soon as that station opens, it requires 12 additional personnel.
Right.
And we've talked about anticipating that a little bit, but for certain, if we maintain our number of men on the truck basis that we have, when that station opens, it requires 12 additional firefighters.
Yeah, I got you.
Okay.
So this is the revenue that we need all in one place, all in one sheet. I've tried to take all of the things that we've talked about, all the needs, all the increases, all of the new hires, all the things that we talked last year that we were underfunding, like street maintenance and stormwater, and the increases in CERS, and break it down over the next 5 years into what are our additional revenue needs. So if we talk about hiring over the next 3 years, 5 new police officers and 5 new firefighters a year, and then over the next 2 years, 2 new public works employees each year, giving everybody as a first responder, or I should say police and fire, because we already gave the increases that we talked about to 911, I believe.
Yes, we did.
If we do all that, if we account for the increase in CERS, now the CERS increases that you see on there are just the cost of the rates going up and what the difference in what it would have been if that rate had stayed the same. So the CERS normal costs are included in the cost of the hiring in the first 3 rows. So you add the cost of increasing the rate. We start fully funding street maintenance. We start funding stormwater. They sent me a budget the other day that Strand put together for them as part of the rate analysis they're getting ready to do. And they have $550 a year in operating costs and an additional $0 to $800,000 a year in finance cost and debt service. They're calling it I can't remember what they're calling it. I don't think they're looking at it in terms of a long-term bond, but a letter of credit type situation. And I think that they've overestimated a little bit on what they might need and what the rates might be and things like that, because they're not city finance people. But I think $800,000 is a good number. It's the number we've all sort of thought about for years.
Yep.
That's $550 for operating costs and another $250 for debt service. And that debt service would fund the various capital projects that already need to be done. And
Right.
one assumes that there would be multiple rounds of that over the next 10 to 15 years, because there are lots of projects, and when they come back here in the next few weeks and they come to council and say, here are your stormwater needs, here's your stormwater needs analysis. They've got a list of capital projects, just like I've shown you that need to be done. So that, that number to get there is, it's not small.
No, that's huge. $800,000 a year.
Yep. So
They can spend that easy.
I think that's cheap. I mean, when you think about stormwater as a utility, like water or sewer, that's cheap.
Well, we're spending something now. I don't know if it's 400 or 500, but I know it's coming out of the general fund. I mean, we're plugging in some money for it, but
Right.
Actually, he has 0 in his budget. Doesn't he, Mayor?
We made him strip it out.
We zeroed it out to make this
Yeah.
budget work. So that's is something we have to do. In fact, Andrew, this line item for me begins to blur with a stormwater utility conversation. Which is which?
It's
Because you're representing here a general fund.
right now it's a general fund need, is my point. So if we look at how you get that revenue, a stormwater utility fee would go to offset that general fund need. I guess you're right. You have to back it out, but it's still a current revenue need. If today we were to fund stormwater to the extent necessary, we could only do it out of the general fund. So it's an $800,000 general fund revenue cost, right? Or revenue need.
Generally, we do it out of an emergency. When we have to scrape around to try to find the money when something comes up.
So if you pass a stormwater utility fee, you could take that out and you could reduce the total revenue increase needed by that amount. And move it out of the general fund.
right. I think that's our goal.
Exactly. And that's what we've touted. We'll reduce that burden on the general fund. And I do think in some prior years, we have spent $700,000-$800,000.
We have.
I know, yeah, no doubt. I mean, you think about the Bradshaw property and, that big project. And then Mayor, I guess when I first came on council, you'd probably already teed it up, but there was a pretty massive, was it Washington Street project came down behind City Hall and the courthouse. That was a pretty extensive project as well.
That was the last community development block grant, David, we did. Our Boston project.
Well, we also, you have to stop and think about the fact of the ever impending emergency that could happen at any time over there on Gannett. You remember the deterioration or Bourbon, one of them that
Bourbon,
the
the sewer line.
The storm sewer is just, we could have a cave in over there. So I think that's okay. And I also want to point out that if we go back up a couple of line items there, that cost of $3,000 per first responder salary increases, that's a placeholder for this analysis. What we saw in those previous charts is that's probably not adequate, but it's a placeholder. But this doesn't get us up to the averages that we talked about. So it's not really a proposal. It's simply a spreadsheet to give you a what if.
Sure.
Get your interpretation.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what number to plug in there. And the truth is there's likely not one number to plug in. The number needs to come out, and we need to sit down and say, what is it? What are we aiming for when we say we want to, adjust those salaries and then go from there with each individual salary and say, here's the total cost over the next 5 years. But it's going to be more than that. I mean, this is sort of baseline.
I was going to say, That, yeah. It just makes sense to adjust the salary and then give this projection. Otherwise, we're gonna be in the same place we're in. It's not gonna, it's not gonna cease. Am I thinking correctly?
Connie, I think you are. I worry about that number is just clearly not big enough. And if we make this presentation publicly, you're gonna have a lot of unhappy people just based on what we're using as a projection.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, you all just did the $5,000 and you know what expectation continues to be is how do you think that's going to go over?
well, I don't think it is because they have that expectation of that raise just to be at average. I mean, that's very average, and that's why I think Tammy's asking for those 5 cities that they're compared to us to see where theirs are. But if we don't at least get the salaries up, there's no reason for us to do any of this because the projections aren't right, right? This is just showing us what it would be if we just did it where we're at right now, right?
No, I mean, it.
Except stormwater.
Well, that is the cost that you see there in line 4 of a $3,000 increase. So
Okay,
if you did it, if you up that number, I can give you new numbers. The point is to help understand the scale here of the increases that are needed. We're not just talking about hoping that our economy gets better to be able to afford the things that we're talking about. You're talking about by the time you get to year 4, I mean, if you got a $24 million budget and you need $8.5 million more a year in revenue, you've almost increased your budget by, was that 80% at that point?
right.
Or 40%, sorry.
So I'm in the weeds too much, and you're trying to give us a big picture, and all this does get down to a bottom line. The only thing that for the committee's point of view, we talked about not sure we need debt service in year 1. But yeah, David, when we look at performance, we can build that in later cycles when you think you're actually going to incur the debt. But still, it's a placeholder that indicates that if we move forward with some of these really key projects through debt, this is the kind of general fund revenue increase we're going to need to say grace over all this.
Mm-hmm.
Those first 3 years, I essentially assumed that we would do Lexus Way and Old Oxford Road, about half of the capital projects need. And then
I see that it kind of graduates up.
starting in year 4, that's when we do the Fire Station 4.
And
Yeah.
I mean, I kind of backed into it on the 1.2 million. Are you assuming about a $19 million loan?
I was at substantially lower than that, actually. And so I may not have done the math right, but I thought I had found a pretty good calculator on there. And I don't remember what, I think the number was 16 or 18 million dollars. Yeah.
Okay, well, you're close. Let's just do 18 million for 20 years.
Yeah.
Is that okay? What rate I mean, I'm thinking like 2.5%.
Yeah, that's the kind of numbers we're seeing. I'd say 3 to be conservative.
All right. That puts the payment at literally $100,000 a month.
Yep. That's consistent with what we got there.
Yeah. Yep.
So
I think it was, go back up, I think it was Old Oxford, Lexus Way, and the City Hall exterior stabilization.
Okay.
That's actually only 14, but so So you could
Well,
lower
anyway,
it. If you
that's
want.
all right. At least it gives us an idea. That's
The value of this exercise, to me, is we can now look at a very systematic approach to any possible expense reduction or an evaluation of services and different ways of providing those services to see if we can look at cost containment there. I think we'll have a fairly comprehensive list for you on some cost containment and efficiency of operation ideas. One I mentioned in a meeting the other day. Last year we had, Connie, I mentioned government affairs. Last year we had over 1,400 alarm drops that
Yeah.
the police department responded to. David, an analysis of those shows that 2% were valid, necessary alarm drops. And we have significant work to do to apply our ordinance and identify our frequent flyers and help become more efficient with that process.
sure.
It's just one example of things that we're looking at. So if there are other ways to provide services where we can equal the service and reduce our cost, we know we have an obligation to look at that to reduce these numbers before we look at revenue. And, we commit that we will make that effort at the same time that we talk about revenue or before.
No, I like that one, Mayor. I don't know that it, how much it could possibly generate, but if nothing else, maybe it'll encourage, those reoccurring offenders to get their systems in check and in order, and reduce the the calls. So I guess that's part of the objective.
Sure.
Good one. I like that.
Well, unless you all have any other questions, I'm going to move on from here to
Okay.
options. This is what the mayor talked about, that we've now gone through, sort of recapped where we were, and we've talked about what our current needs assessment is. And next we'll talk about how we might get there. And I'm going to present sort of the big three. I'm not going to, well, I'll just walk through it. So these are what I am defining as the practical options for increasing general fund revenue. The big three are right up front. It's increasing the payroll tax, increasing the insurance premium tax, and switching from a net profits to a gross receipts tax. Those are the ones that are likely to have the largest monetary impact, or the potential to do so. A stormwater utility fee is right on the heels of that. But it is a fee, not a tax. It must do no more than offset the costs of maintaining stormwater as a utility in Georgetown. And honestly, I call it a general fund revenue option, but the moment you pass it, it becomes a special fund, and it's not a general fund. It's just helping to offset our current general fund costs. An easy thing we can do that's going to have small impact, but great, it's a great policy, is put a special property tax rate on abandoned urban property. Some cities set 50 cents on the 100 for properties that just are abandoned. We're not talking about an empty lot here. We're talking about a house that somebody's just walked away from, or a business that's sat vacant for 10 years or whatever. There's definitions in the statute, but it's something that cities do a lot. We can
A lot of cities have done this, and in fact, our neighbor, Sadieville, just recently passed an ordinance of this type.
How does that play out? Tell me what that does.
I guess it's less of a revenue generator than it is it's a deterrent against allowing urban blight, but it also helps to get those properties back into the, into revenue generating and economy boosting property. So it sort of does dual duty, if that makes any sense. You got businesses that if you got a commercial building that sat vacant for 6 years and we determine that it is now subject to a property rate that's 15 times higher than it is today, your owner is going to have an immediate incentive to say, all right, it's time to fix this building up and get this turned around, or sell it to someone who will.
Would this apply to some of the homes, houses that we have in the community that have been essentially abandoned that, code enforcement's trying to be dealing with?
Yes.
David, in fact, I think that's the primary application for the tool.
Yeah.
That's the way it's been used in a number of other cities. The rationale at conferences that I've been at is cities incur more cost from abandoned property, boarding, code issues, things of that nature. So we have more cost in them. It's both a carrot and a stick. We need to cover our cost of those properties, and we want the owner to be having a financial incentive to make them better places.
Gotcha. One of the, I guess we've been dealing with a lot of properties that I guess that have been abandoned and they've got delinquent taxes. Connie and I, have kind of dealt with this over the years, just being involved in real estate. We've seen this happen, and it doesn't seem like there's ever a catalyst to get those properties into a productive manner. The taxes and all the other assessments are sometimes in excess of the value, and the homeowners not the homeowners, but the property owners are kind of like stuck.
Yeah.
Is there something we can do to motivate that? I guess, do we have to take it to, through the foreclosure process, I guess, or whatever?
Other than the general effort that admittedly code enforcement and the fire department have really ramped up lately to talk to those people, pick up the phone and say, hey, what's going on? How can we help? And we have options like deed in lieu of foreclosure that cities use, and we're starting to do more of. In fact, I think we just did one recently. We call and say, look, what are your intentions here? There's $4,000 in tax liens and $6,000 in code enforcement liens, and the property's worth, with a fallen down, dilapidated house on it, it's worth zero. What can we do to help you out? Other than that, what we're really talking about is ensuring that the property goes to the foreclosure process sooner rather than later.
Okay. Right.
And applying a special tax rate to it is either going to get them to get their act together, or it's going to accelerate the speed at which it arrives in foreclosure court.
Okay.
Does that knock out eminent domain?
Eminent domain is sort of a broader term, Connie. I mean, you can get a property through eminent domain by declaring it to be blight, and then going and paying the value of it. Okay. And if it has $20,000 in code enforcement liens and property taxes owed,
and it's worth $5,
right? Then the value is going to be zero.
Right.
And somebody who the sort of the pitfall there is somebody who would go to bid on that project knows that they have to satisfy a pretty high lien owed to the city, and it may make them less
inclined to do.
Less inclined to bid on it, and the city's going to end up owning it.
Well, back over to the foreclosure, with a lot of the blighted places that we're talking about, are there not numerous heirs on some of that property that you can't get a hold of, or
yes,
how is that going to play into
the foreclosure process? Takes care of that. but
Okay.
so does the eminent domain process.
Right. But the foreclosure process keeps us from owning it.
It can. I mean, when you foreclose, it gets sold on the courthouse steps.
Right.
But you know, there are a variety of reasons why cities actually decide to be the high bidder on those,
Yeah.
because they want to have the house torn down, or they want to do something with it, or they want to sell it on the market when the market's good.
Right.
But
Okay.
A lot of cities have developed what are called land banks,
Right.
and they actually hold lots, multiple lots, hundreds of lots all over town.
Yeah, I remember Andrew and I talking about that in code enforcement when we set that up. It was on the table.
Land banks give the city a lot of flexibility in that regard.
Mm-hmm. That's a definite goal.
Yep. So we could also levy a gas franchise fee, and that could be a decent amount of revenue. The issue today is we don't know. I don't know how much the gas company brings in profit. So I can't begin to tell you how much we'll get in revenues. It's just an option. When we did our gas franchise fee 5 years ago, we left ourselves the option of putting up to a 5% franchise fee on with an ordinance. We talked about development impact fees, and those are a great tool. The issue is the word I use is practical, and coming up with a practical scheme for implementing development fees today is not practical, and it's not fast, and it's not clear when it would, to what developments it could be applicable and take effect. So in terms of an immediate practical general fund revenue option, it ranks really low in my mind. That doesn't mean that it's something we don't need to explore.
Right.
And then, to the extent that places like building inspection and our fire inspection, and even the lots in the cemetery, the plots in the cemetery, to the extent that we're not recouping our costs of running those departments 100%, those fees could be increased. I mean, it's been 3 or 4 years since we've looked at building inspection fees. It's been a long, long time since we've looked at cemetery costs, with what it costs to purchase a plot at the cemetery. It's just something that, in general, that we could do.
Wouldn't that be fairly easy to do, though?
Sure would.
I know, just saying out loud, if we're looking at the first top 3, wouldn't that be something that would be easy to do that you could reap down the road?
Yes.
Okay.
They're very practical options. They're not going to. They're a small bite at the apple, but that doesn't make them any less important.
Right. It is.
Yeah.
True.
I think there is a big expectation out there, though, Andrew, that we begin to look at impact fees or development fees to begin to protect us today for what's not going to rear its head for 20 years.
Right.
And we suffer with those all over the place today that we wish there had been an allowance made for 20 years ago.
Yep.
Well, I remember they tried to, Tom, and it didn't work. It was bucked big time.
It was.
But now there's not as many developers and builders as there were back then because of 2008. They knocked a lot of people out.
Yeah.
Much
Andrew,
like the
this page
stormwater
is really.
utility
Go ahead.
and much like the stormwater utility fee, there is a large amount of data and analysis that has to go into doing something like that, and there would need to be, I think, as you sort of hinted at, stakeholder input. And I mean, it's not something, as in terms of a payroll tax or an insurance premium tax, it takes 20 minutes to change a number in an ordinance and say that it is what it is. But when you're talking about writing an impact fee ordinance, it's not a quick or easy undertaking because we're starting from scratch.
Right.
We're actually, unless you're branching out and looking at other states and cities in other states, we would be sort of plowing new ground on that.
Well, we would be, Andrew, but I do know that there's been a lot of study on it. When I first got on city council, there was a huge study on it when I was with Eric.
Yeah.
You know, and it's kind of put by the wayside because people really didn't understand it. So it's something that we've been fighting for years.
Right.
And like you said, in the past few years, we put out a lot of money for stormwater. So I think it's something that as we move forward, that we don't take it off the table. Because like you said, it's right at the heel.
Yeah.
That's
So-
input.
So my other just general observations about general fund revenue options is just like we just did with 911, there's nothing that says we have to pass an ordinance that says this is the rate from now forever. We can phase in, the increases, just like we're talking about phasing in our hires and our revenue needs, or we're phasing in, we can phase in the tax and fee increases to pay for these things, but you do it all up front. You pass it in one ordinance that says in year 2021, here's the rate, and in year 2022, here's the rate, and so on and so on and so on. The second bullet point is a reminder, a clarification that if we wanted to do an insurance premium tax increase, our deadline this year is March 23rd. And that will become effective in July 1. If we don't do that, then we're talking about not having it be effective until July of 22.
Yeah, well, that's kind of new good news. The mayor mentioned to me, I believe that might be a possibility to get some revenue for this upcoming budget.
Yes.
So as opposed to waiting to the following year, that's
Right.
positive.
Yeah, I thought that was really important, David. We can, if there's a desire to change insurance premium tax, we can look at a full year of revenue rather than a half a year.
Yes.
So next, let's talk a little bit about what I'm considering as less practical general fund revenue options. And obviously, number one, there is very little we can do to increase our property tax.
Right.
We're stuck with state law. And if we tried to pass a 10-cent property tax increase, in my mind, there's no way it's going to pass. It's going to get overturned. So we need to keep the rate going up, and we need to at the very least keep it where it is because it's low. But there's nothing that we can do today to make it a revenue generator. A restaurant tax would provide great revenue for beautification and parks and certain capital improvements, but it wouldn't directly offset costs of the general fund.
Right.
It would offset some costs that we're spending for parks and rec and things like that, but it would do so through cooperation with the folks who have 100% control over that money, which is the tourism board.
Right.
So I'm not saying it isn't a practical revenue option. I'm saying it's a less practical general fund revenue option. It would bring wonderful things to our city, but it does not help in general, our first responder salary and numbers problem that we face.
Andrew,
I'm sorry, David, go ahead.
well, Andrew, did you not tell us one other time that if we did pass that, we had a restaurant tax, and then the legislature down the road changed and allowed some of the money or more of the money to go to the general fund, that we would kind of missed that opportunity, would have been kind of grandfathered in?
No, I think that's, unless I'm misunderstanding it, it's backwards of what I said.
I think that ship has sailed.
Well, there was a proposal 2 years ago to change the legislation to allow a restaurant tax to be used for economic development, which is a
Okay.
much broader category.
Yeah.
And to allow the, excuse me, to allow the money to actually be retained by the city, not by the tourism board. A provision of the legislation said those cities that already have a restaurant tax, this does not apply to them. So they would not get that ability. They would forever keep things where it was. So my caveat was, don't pass that.
Right.
Under the current legislation, don't pass that, because you're gonna get hosed, is what you're gonna get.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, I think that's what David was saying.
Yeah. Okay. Then I'm sorry, I misunderstood, Doug.
Okay.
That's all right.
We talked a number of times about privatizing garbage collection, and Steve's out in the court square yelling. There may be a whole bunch of practical reasons to do that, and there are a whole bunch of practical reasons to do that, but generating general fund revenue is not one of them. It would generate a very small franchise fee at 3%. So, and that's a really bold estimate of. I mean, I took the number of households times $15 for a garbage fee and multiplied it by 3%, and you get $78,000 a year. It probably would be less than that. It's not something we would do for the sole purpose of generating revenue. But there may be a whole bunch of other reasons why we would do it. I'll leave it at that.
There'll be a point in the future when this decision might be different. But today, the sanitation fund is paying really have an impact on our general fund right now.
Yeah.
Well, I want to be the elephant in the room here for a minute, because I know you heard this remark from Senator Thayer when they were talking about the gas tax and about raising it, and said through this COVID, to not put it on anybody right now. There's going to be that attitude from some council members when we start talking about raising revenue, that's going to be negative about it. And I'm just throwing that out because that's a true statement, right? So, but at the end of the day, to me, looking at what we're looking at again, it's an emergency type situation that we're going to have to address. But we can't address it unless we have that stream of revenue coming in. And that's what has to be pushed home. And I realize that they're going to be saying that, but we're all going to be paying it. We're all going to feel the pinch, right?
Well, yes, I think that is right, Connie. If we can, again, establish the need and make the fact that we established the need credible, and we've made a good case for what the city needs, what our first responders need. And then we take an honest look at where we are, and then we talk about ways to reduce costs. That we don't think there's a lot of fat in this budget, but we have some ideas about ways to do things differently that might save us some money. And then if we decide that we really as a community need those additional police officers and firefighters, then we have a choice. We can either ignore that need or address that need. That truly will be a council decision.
I know that.
This is at this point, this is just about telling you what the needs are and what the tools are to get there. The harder part is
To make that
whether
decision.
you get there, yeah, and how.
And how. And Andrew, it might help. You still got the slides about the if some of the rates were tinkered with.
It's next. That's good.
Yeah, I've been
David,
looking at them.
I'm sorry you can't see this, but you can review it on your PDF later.
I'm seeing it.
Yeah.
I'm
So
looking at.
this is just a reminder of the fact that in our peer group, we are the only one that stacks. Although I was texting, the mayor asked it that I would double check and make sure there aren't any other major cities out there that have this issue. And I checked with JD at the league, and he texted me back earlier that he thought that Winchester stacked. That's not consistent with what I had learned, but that's worth me looking into. But other than Corbin and the Jefferson County on here that we talked about, we're really unique in that fact. We all know that the fact that we stack our taxes with the county it makes us unique, and it gives us a unique set of difficulties. So I won't dwell on that anymore. We know that.
Right.
No, that's huge. And the mayor's talked about it, and I totally agree.
Yeah.
Guys, I might need to give you a little bit of a 10-minute warning here, but
Sure.
I might have to step off in about 10 minutes.
We're at the end, nearing the end.
Okay.
I'll try to get through what's important quick, and then we can keep on talking.
Okay, go ahead.
Increasing the payroll tax. This is just a chart that shows it's just basic math. If you had a 0.25% increase based on last year's numbers, you're looking at about a $3.3 million increase. If you got a 3% increase, you're looking at about a $4.3 million increase in revenues. And if you had a 0.5% increase, you're looking at about a $6.5 million annual revenue increase. And I sort of tried to forecast that out based on growth.
It's just a menu of rates.
Yep.
Okay.
That's the thing, is it's about as simple as we can get to forecast it. I mean, other than doing economic analysis, we just take the current rate and multiply it by 1.25%. So same thing, insurance premium tax rates, a reminder that we are at 5%, that the Bluegrass ad average, which is a new number, is 7.98%, and our peers average is 8.19%. So, I mean, we're off the peer average by 3%. Well,
How much is 3%?
Points. 3% is $2 million more additional revenue annually.
Okay.
That could be earmarked for debt.
Yeah, I mean, you can set it for whatever you want, but
Part of it anyway. When you're looking at that debt that you gave us a while ago, we could get quite a bit done.
Right.
Go ahead. David's got 10 minutes.
I mean, that's essentially it on those two big ones. I've got, as far as gross receipts tax goes, I have got a whole separate presentation that I'm not going to share with you all today. It's very detailed, but it's not 100% polished yet, and we're not ready to talk about it until it's been polished. But I will tell you that generally speaking, it could generate anywhere from $2.5 to $5 million more annual revenues, depending on the rate you set and the restrictions and the structure you use. There's a ton of different ways it could be structured. That's one of the greatest features of it, is that you have so much flexibility. But the number one thing that it's going to do is it's going to resolve the inequity of the fact that small businesses are paying way more than their fair share of a percentage of their profits to us in taxes, compared to large businesses, many of which are not paying a dime.
Right.
And I can illustrate that in real numbers from real data.
Okay.
We elected to only go this far with the gross receipts conversation today. David, I think there's some other conversations that I need to have before we do much more publicly on the issue.
I agree, Mayor, and that sounds very good. To me, the gross receipts, you know, I think hopefully we have either one or the other, the gross receipts possibility or the payroll tax possibility. I mean, those are both pretty substantial increases or changes or whatever. They do a lot for us. But for me right now, you know, with what I learned last year and what we're learning, you know, kind of updating ourselves on now, I'm still very good with the stormwater and getting to understand that a little bit better. I know we've got a couple of options and we got to decide on that, but to me, I don't see any, you know, I know that we're talking about proceeding with that, and I'm ready personally to proceed with that and help, you know, any way I can lead that charge. Secondly, I think we've got to start thinking about the insurance tax because of the timing. It might take us a while if we're going to do the gross receipts. That might take a little bit of while to understand it, to talk to our community partners and the chamber and whomever else. So to me, the insurance tax would be the next one. I just want to give it some thought about where does that money go? You know, does it all go towards capital? Maybe it does. I'm not saying it doesn't by any means, but to me, that's probably, those two are the two that I'm pretty ready to proceed with, I believe, based on what we're looking at.
I agree. But do you think it's inappropriate to even talk about the payroll tax in the same breath? Do you think
to
that's
me, I think, and Mayor and Andrew, you all can give us your opinion, but I would think that if we did if we can come to terms with the gross receipts tax, there may not be any need to make an adjustment to the payroll tax. That's my hope, to be honest.
And at the very least, David, what I'm hearing you say is that you think that we've got to have the gross receipts analysis before you're ready to talk about doing a payroll tax increase.
Strategically, I think that would be to our advantage, Nathan or Andrew. Yes, and we can talk more about that.
Sure.
When you're ready.
I mean, I'm just speaking as Andrew Hartley here, but the numbers that I've seen, the analysis I've done from the gross receipts tax, it's bigger than how much revenue can we get and how much revenue do we need. It's about a fundamental issue that we've been hearing for a while now, which is that we feel like our small businesses are being treated unfairly, and the big box, you know, global chains are getting away with murder.
Yeah.
And it, at the same time, depending on the rate you set, it has the ability to present as much of a change as a 1/4 to 1/3% increase in your payroll tax.
That's right. Yeah. And there may be some employers that like that approach and would rather that be. I don't know. I don't know, but I think we've got to. I just don't think we can do the payroll tax without getting more serious and having some discussion about the gross receipts.
The equity issue, I think, is a very important one that Andrew mentioned. And the other thing is when we go into this detailed presentation, the fact that we know that the vast number of our local small to medium-sized businesses will actually see a tax reduction from what they pay today. I think there are parts of this that will be, most of this, once it's understood, will be warmly received. I think there are a lot of misperceptions and folks are frightened by change of this magnitude, but this has the potential to be a very positive conversation. David, we need to let you go, it looks like.
Is he gone?
He's still there.
Well, David, okay, just real quick. I know what you are talking about, and I just want to throw this out. and I might be overthinking it, or I might be being greedy. I don't know. But I personally, as a resident, not just as a council person, would want to be able to see us have enough additional revenue the quickest way we can to implement the raises and the hiring of new people, and build up our fund balance a little bit more, and maybe set aside some money for the capital projects that we want to do, that we could pay debt. And I would like to see us do that quicker while we work on the grocery receipts tax thing, and maybe implement that next year. That's just a thought.
Well, and this is a good start to a conversation.
Okay.
And then, Andrew, do Connie and David each have a copy of these slides as well?
Yes.
That's what
I'm
I'm
getting mine off.
Yeah.
Then, then I think that as soon as we can have some other conversations with community partners that I think should happen, then we'll be prepared to make a more detailed presentation to the Finance Committee, Connie, about gross receipts tax and how they work, and the multiple options that the council has to custom make that ordinance fit our community and our businesses.
Okay.
Andrew, is
That
that
sounds
everything we need to
fair.
do?
I think that's it. We, you know, the thing that I really wanted us to just sort of be thinking about is, what's the next step? What's the strategy for? I mean, we kind of had to put everything on hold for a solid year. That's what we've done. It's about a year ago to this week that we delivered this presentation, the presentation to you all. We had momentum behind us to do something. And then COVID took that momentum completely away. And now here we are, by choice and by design. We waited till the new council. We've waited until we're sort of feel like we're entering that next phase of the pandemic. Hopefully with a vaccine, we're seeing the end of that pandemic. But the question for me that I'm trying to get answered is, what's next? And I think the second step I've presented to you is, we've told you what generally our issues are. Here are specifically what our needs are, and here's what those costs are. Now, let's start to talk about what the potential solutions are, and in what combinations we can, we might present for legislation.
I think, Andrew, that step one is for Connie and David to digest all of this. Even with the benefit of our study from a year ago, this is still a lot to digest. And then I think as soon as we can, early next week, Connie, if we could get some feedback from you and David about what you've seen, if it's looks reasonable to you, if it's persuasive, and then I think we can have a couple of very serious conversations about if indeed we think our conclusions are reasonable, then we can talk about various combinations or steps that we can take solid steps on that move us in that direction. I just think for right now, you need to digest everything you've seen.
Yeah, I agree, Mayor. Okay.
And then we'll circle back to you to see what you think about it, and see if we make the case well enough. And we also need to go over with you, what our ideas are about potential expense reduction.
Yes.
I apologize, I don't have that list today.
I think for us to do our job correctly, Connie, we've got to look at both.
You think we might Zoom again next Friday? Is that enough time for you to come up with the expenses or not?
Yeah, in fact, might even give, yeah, I don't know, Andrew, what do you think?
I think if you made it 2 weeks, we could ready, you still need to have whatever conversations you do, but I can certainly
Okay.
be ready to give you a gross receipts presentation in 2 weeks.
Yeah, I like that and the expenses that we can cut.
Yeah, yeah.
And David and I could look over this and digest it, like you said, by the first of the week and kind of give you an idea of where we're wanting to go, and we can implement that too. What do you think?
I think that would be today will be productive if we go that direction.
Okay, is David still on?
No, he's gone.
I think
All
he's
right,
gone.
I'll just text him and tell him. But
Okay.
I'll digest this weekend because I'm not going to be doing anything. So I'll look it over and get some numbers, calculate some numbers. And see, I just feel like that when we do something, that it needs to be, we don't need to like pussyfoot around with it, for lack of a better word and analogy. It's like when we get ready to do this, we need to go big or go home, because it's not going to go away and we're not going to get any smaller.
Have a plan and
Yes.
it addresses the issue and then bring that plan forward.
Right.
We hear
And
you.
we need to look at being able to build up our fund balance as well, Tom, in the middle
Yeah.
of all of this. Right, Andrew?
Well, and the good news, Connie, is when we present you final end of the year numbers, we're going to be able to show you that we've rebounded a little bit already.
Oh, good. Okay. That's really nice, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's good.
So that just the picture has been so fluid for us that we think we've been correct in being conservative, but now it's time for us to begin to really look at these issues because we're ready to.
Yeah. Well, we are too, for
Yeah.
sure. Okay. It was a good meeting.
Thank you, Andrew. Thanks